Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom, welcome back to today's Daf, which is Eruvin Daf Mem Aleph. On the bottom of Daf Mem Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom, says the Gemara, V'Amar Rabba, Ki Havinon Bei Rav Huna. When we were at the yeshiva Rav Huna, Iboilan, we had the following shaila. Bar Bei Rav, this yeshiva man, the Yosef B'Tanisa, B'Mali Shabbata, who was observing a tanis, accepted upon himself to fast on Erev Shabbos, to do tshuva in preparation of Kedusha Shabbos. The question is, Ma'u Lashlume, is he allowed to, does he have to, complete that tanis until Shabbos? Perhaps he should not do that because he's going to be entering Shabbos in a state of hunger, a state of deprivation, in a state of fasting. So although he's not explicitly fasting on Shabbos, but since it's inevitable, he's going to be entering Shabbos in that state, perhaps that's a problem. There's another point here, because he can't really pinpoint the exact moment when Shabbos enters. So he's going to have to fast a bit into Shabbos as well. It's just inevitable. So perhaps he might not do that. So that's the shaila. Ma'ula shlume. Can he go ahead and be mashlim that tanis, this tanis rishus, this arbitrary tanis that he accepted upon himself? Can he be mashlim it? Can he complete that day with tanis? Does he have to do that? Well, Yahava b'yadei, so Rav Huna didn't really have a response. Asoyil kamei de Rabbi Yehuda. So this is Rav Huna speaking. I came before Rabbi Yehuda and I presented to him this question. Well, Yahava b'yadei, and he also did not have an answer. Omar Rava, or some say Omar Rabba. So it was Rabba himself who proceeded to say like this. Nechzayi anan. Let's take a look. Let's analyze it on our own. The Sanya, we have a brayso, Tes ba'av shechal yes b'Shabbos. If Tisha B'Av, the fast day, falls out on Shabbos, v'chein erev Tisha B'Av shechal yes b'Shabbos. Likewise, if erev Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, and Tisha B'Av is on Sunday, so although generally speaking, Rashi brings that the last Suda of erev Tisha B'Av is meant to be a very small-scale meal. One is not meant to have 2 cooked foods, no meat, no wine. Says the Brisa, but since it's Shabbos, you're unlimited, you're unrestricted. You can eat and drink as much as you'd like, without any limitations. And he go ahead and create this meal, a lavish meal, like Shlomo Melech, at his height when he was a king. So this is the halacha of Shabbos. Continues the Brisa, Erev Shabbos. What if Tisha B'Av falls on Erev Shabbos? In which case, you need to fast on that day. Says the Brisa, but you don't complete. You're not mashlim that tainus. So, towards the end of the day, they serve him a food which has the amount equivalent of the beitza volume to break his fast. And he eats it. So you shouldn't enter Shabbos in a state of suffering, a state of fasting. So according to this shita, no, one is not meant to be mashlim a tanis that he's doing on Erev Shabbos. He's not meant to enter Shabbos in the state of fasting. That's like fasting partially on Shabbos itself. V'tanya Omar Rabbi Yehuda, Pam Machas. There was once a time Hayinun Yoshvin and Rabbi Akiva. He was sitting before Rabbi Akiva. V'tisha b'av shecholes be'erev Shabbos haya. And it was this very same halacha. We had Tisha B'av falling on Erev Shabbos, and we were fasting. And they served him a partially cooked egg. And he swallowed it without salt. He personally had no desire for it. He wasn't hungry. He did it to display, to demonstrate to the Talmidim. And this is the proper halacha. When one has to fast in Erev Shabbos, whether it's a Tisha B'Av fast, or, as we discussed earlier, the tanis that the Barbi Rav is observing, either way, you must go ahead and terminate that tanis before Shabbos' arrival. You can't go into Shabbos in a state of deprivation. So that's the shita of Tanakam of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Misano Mashlim. Actually, you meant to complete the tanis. There's no concern with entering Shabbos in that state of deprivation, as we're soon going to see. So we seem to have a machlokes regarding our question. When a person fasts on Erev Shabbos, Is he meant to be mashlim, to complete that fast into Shabbos, or be mafsik that tanis before Shabbos? According to the Tanakama here, you meant to be mafsik that tanis before Shabbos. Rabbi Yossi holds misane umashlim. Amalei Rabbi Yossi turned to the Chachamim. He's going to prove his point that one may go ahead and be mashlim a tanis that is conducting an Erev Shabbos. He says like this: do you not agree to me in the following case? What happens if Tisha B'Av falls out on Sunday? Then inevitably he's going to have to stop eating at the end of Shabbos, when it's still daytime. As Tosfos points out, because it's very hard to define the exact moment when Shabbos is over and Sunday arrives, so you must stop a bit before nightfall. So you see from here that you can go ahead and complete the Shabbos with a tainus. Okay, so that was his question. Do you agree with me that one is meant to be mafsik from eating boydayim while it's still daytime at the end of Shabbos? Amrullah Aval, yes, certainly. So he told him, if that's the case, so what's the difference between ending your Shabbos in a state of fasting or beginning the Shabbos in a state of fasting? In either case, it's only just a small amount of time. It's not a significant tanis that's being conducted here. And just as you could leave Shabbos in a state of fasting, likewise, you should be allowed to enter Shabbos in a state of fasting. So if the tanis falls out in Erev Shabbos, you have to be marshal in that tanis, although you're coming into Shabbos in a state of fasting. Amalem, so he told him, Mali lekanas bog shemuna. What's the difference between coming into Shabbos in a state of deprivation, a state of suffering, a state of fasting, Mali losis menach shemuna, or leaving Shabbos in that state? Meaning, if you can leave Shabbos in a state of tanis, you should be allowed to enter it as well. So just as you agree with me, when Tisha B'Av falls out on Sunday, what happens? Inevitably, you're going to have to stop before nightfall. So the end of Shabbos is going to be in a state of tanis. Likewise, if there's a tanis on Friday, you're meant to be marshal in that tanis, despite the fact that inevitably you're going to be entering Shabbos in that state of deprivation. They responded to him, how could you compare two things? Well, when you speak about leaving Shabbos in a state of tanis, that's not so terrible. He has eaten and drank the whole day. He's not hungry. He's not deprived. It's after a whole day of eating and drinking. So certainly that's okay. Toimar, how could you compare that to the likanas b'shemuna? How could you say, well, if so, he can go ahead and enter Shabbos in a state of deprivation. He hasn't eaten, nor has he drank the whole day. He's fasting all Friday. So he's entering Shabbos in a state of tanis. It's like he's partially fasting on Shabbos. Therefore, they responded, you can't compare two things. And they hold that indeed one is not meant to be mashlim a tanis that's conducted on Shabbos. Because otherwise, you're going to be fasting on part of that Shabbos. Ula concluded that halacha follows Rabbi Yossi, who holds that one is meant to be mashlim a tanis of Erev Shabbos. So this was the conclusion of Rabbi. He says, let's analyze the halacha in this case. The conclusion is, it was a machlekes tanaim, and Ula concluded for us and went to follow Rabbi Yossi, misane umashlim. Says the Gemara, umi avdina Rabbi Yossi. Does halacha really follow Rabbi Yossi, who holds that one is meant to complete the tanis of Shabbos? V'avraminu. V'kash from our Bryce. V'avramini ein goyzerin tanis alat sibur. We're speaking about establishing the fast days when there was a rain stoppage. So not meant to establish a tanis, a public tanis, Rosh Chodashim, B'Chanukah, B'Purim. These are days of Yom Tovim, of Moed. We're not meant to initiate a fast day on these days. But v'mischilu ein mafsikin. What happens if they've already initiated a series of fast days, and sometimes throughout this series of fast days, they've encountered one of these days, Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah, Purim, then we don't disrupt the sequence of fast days. Ein mafsikin, and we fast even on those days. Divrei Rabban Gamliel. Amar Rabbi Meir, you're meant to know as follows. Aval pisha Amar Gamliel, ein mafsikin, even though Rabbi Gamliel just told us, we're not meant to disrupt the fast days. We're meant to fast even Rosh Chodesh, on Chanukah Purim. However, he agreed that you're not meant to be mashlim, to complete the fast days. Fast, fine, but towards the end of the day, terminate that fast. It's not meant to be a complete fast day. It's meant to be a partial fast day. The Gemara soon is going to call it a tanis shois, a partial fast day. So even he would agree that you're not meant to be mashlim when the fast day falls out on Chodesh Chanukah Purim. V'chein, the same concept will apply b'tesbav shechaliyas b'erev Shabbos. If Tisha B'av falls on Erev Shabbos, so today we don't have that because we run according to the calendar system. But this would happen in time of Hamikdash. Tisha B'av can fall on Erev Shabbos. It says Reb Meir that Reb Gamliel held that in that situation you wouldn't complete the tanis. Rather, you would terminate it prior to Shabbos, so that you don't walk into Shabbos in a state of fasting. So this was the Shita of Reb Gamliel. V'tanya, la'achab tirasei shel Rab Gamliel, after Reb Gamliel passed away, nichnas Rabbi Yehoshua la'afes dvarav. Rabbi Yehoshua came in to annul his words. No, meaning, who meant to be mashlim, the tanis. He disagreed with Reb Gamliel, who held a mashlim. So what happened? Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Raglav. Rabbi Yochanan ben stood up and he said, Va'amar, Chaziana, it appears to me that the correct approach should be the basa reisha, after the head, gufa azal, the body is meant to follow. Meaning, just as we followed Rabbi Gamliel up until this point, we went to follow him further. We went to go after the divrei harishonim, Rashi says, the words of the previous ones, of the previous generation. Therefore, we're not meant to change things. We're meant to keep it in this way. We're not meant to be mashlim. Continues the Brisa, Kol Yamav Shel Gamliel, Kavano Lacha Kemoisei. This is Rabbi Yechanan speaking. He's responding to Rabbi Yehoshua. When Gamliel was around his entire lifetime, we followed his shita. Kavano Lacha Kemoisei. Achshav atem avakish levatel dvarav. Now you wish to be mavatel his words. Yehoshua ein shoym lecha. We don't listen to you. Shekvar nikva Lacha Gamliel. Because Allah was already established, like Gamliel, that the tanis is not meant to be completed. And nobody challenged it. This became the accepted halacha that the tanis will not be completed. Says the Gemara, apparently, that Allah follows Gamliel. So when we're speaking about, for instance, the tanis which took place on Erev Shabbos, we're not meant to be mashlim that tanis. We're concerned about coming into Shabbos. Kishu mu'una, in a state of fasting. So how is this compatible with Ula, who told us that Allah follows Rabbi Yossi, who says Misana Umashlim? Says the Gemara, depends on which generation. In that generation, of Gamliel, they followed his shita, and they were not Mashlim. But there is Rabbi Yossi, which was the subsequent generation, they switched things, and Avad Rabbi Yossi, they followed Rabbi Yossi, who holds that we're meant to be Misana and Mashlim the Tanis. Says the Gemara, so you mean to say in the time of Gamliel, in his generation, they followed his shita? V'atanya, we have a brayso which indicates otherwise. Amar Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Tzaddik, Ani mibnei Sanav ben Binyamin. So Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Tzaddik testified, he was in the time of Gamliel, and he testified as follows: I belong to the family of Sanav ben Binyamin, from the Shevet Binyamin, as Tosfos explains. Ben Binyamin is the Shevet of Binyamin. Now, as Rashi explains that during the days of Vayisheni, there was a shortage of firewood for the Mizbeach, so several families volunteered to donate on a regular basis firewood for the Ma'aracha for the Mizbeach. And they drew lots, and they determined which day is going to be designated for which family, and that day becomes their Yom Tov. They brought their firewood, they brought a carbon, it became their Yom Tov. They celebrated that day. So this family, son of Ben Binyamin, was one of those families. And their day of Hakravas Eitzim, of Yom Tov, was actually the 10th day of Av, right after Tisha B'Av. So Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Tzaddik, who was a member of that family, said like this: Pamachas chol Tisha B'Av liyes b'Shabbos. There was once a case where Tisha B'Av fell out on Shabbos, v'dechinu lachar Shabbos, and we postponed it till after Shabbos. And indeed we fasted on Sunday. But since Sunday, which is really the 10th day of which is our Yom Tov, that's why we didn't complete the fast day. We didn't complete it. We fasted partially, but we didn't complete it. We didn't conduct ourselves like an ordinary fast day. Why? Because it was our Yom Tov. Therefore, we mitigated somewhat the effect of the Tanis. We fasted, but not to completion. So this was the statement dictated by Rabbi Lezer Tzaddik. Stop. Okay, says the Gemara. Tama de Yom Tov. Apparently, it's only because that day was the Yom Tov. It was the 10th day of Av. So they didn't complete the day. Rather, they were not mashlim. So they fasted, but it was out being mashlim. But on your standard typical year, when Tisha B'Av fell out on a Tuesday, so although it was really their Erev Yom Tov, right? Their Yom Tov was on the following day, on the 10th day of Av. So Tisha B'Av fell out on their Erev Yom Tov. It appears from this brisa they had no concern, no qualms about completing their Tanis, their Tisha B'Av, although it was Erev Yom Tov. Coming into the Yom Tov in a state of fasting, there's no concern. Tama the Yom Tov. The only concern was only because that day was Yom Tov. So they didn't complete the Tanis. Ha-Erev Yom Tov. But on your typical year, when Tisha B'Av fell out during the weekday, and it was the day prior to Asara B'Av, which was their Yom Tov, Mashliman, they would complete their Tanis. So apparently, even during the Doir of Rabbi Gamliel, right, this was the Doir of Gamliel, they didn't conduct themselves according to his Shita. He was not meant to be Mashlim on Erev Shabbos. Here we see they had no concern, no hesitation to be Mashlim their fast day, even though it was the day preceding their Yom Tov. Amar Avina, how could you compare Shabbos and this Yom Tov? This is a Yom Tov Rabbanon. Doesn't have the same weight as Shabbos. Sham the Yom Tov Shel Devrayim. Here it's different. This Yom Tov that they observed was a Yom Tov Shel Devrayim, a Rabbanon Yom Tov. So, just as we just learned that even when it was the actual day of their Yom Tov, they would fast. Although they wouldn't complete the fast day, but they would fast. Right? That was a story where Tisha B'Av was postponed to Sunday, which was actually the 10th day of Av, which was their Yom Tov. Rav Lezer told us they fasted on that day. A Tanis Shah is a partial fast day, okay. But that's something unique to a Yom Tov D'Rabban. That wouldn't be allowed on Shabbos. On Shabbos, one is not allowed to fast even a partial fast day, even a Tanis Shah. So since we see that Yom Tov D'Rabban has that kula that allows them to fast partially, so likewise, on the day preceding that Yom Tov, you could complete the Tanis. Although you're entering the Yom Tov in a state of fast, that's okay because it's no worse than a Tanis Shais on the actual day of their Yom Tov. Therefore, there was no concern there. As opposed to Shabbos, where one may not fast even part of Shabbos day. Even a Tanis Shais is not allowed. Because the Shabbos Oineg is meant to be a day of delight. Some say it's Minat Torah even. One is not allowed to fast on Shabbos. So since you can't even fast part of Shabbos, likewise, when the Tanis day is Erev Shabbos, you're not meant to complete that Tanis and enter Shabbos in a state of fasting. Says Amar Avina, Shana Yom Tov Shel Devrayim. We're speaking about a Yom Tov D'Rabban, that's different. Just as you can conduct a partial fast day on the actual Yom Tov, as we just saw, Mashlima by Arviyos. Likewise, you can be Mashlim at Tanis that takes place on the Erev, on the day preceding that Yom Tov. Because at most, it's only a partial fast that's happening. In contrast to Shabbos, Hoil ve'emasana b'shoy, since certainly one is not allowed to conduct even a partial fast day on Shabbos, a mashlim b'arviyos. Likewise, you may not be mashlim the fast day that takes place on the day preceding Shabbos, because inevitably you're going to be entering Shabbos in a state of fasting, and it's like fasting on part of Shabbos. Let's take a look at Rashi inside. So it's 22 lines from the bottom. Beginning with the word Shana Yom Tov, the carbon. This is different. Kigoin Hai, the carbon eitzim. Hoyel v'kalu, since we find that it's lenient. Shemas anu by the shoys. Kidiktani v'saninu boy. As we just said, they would fast on that day if Tisha B'Av was postponed to that day. So since it has that kula, lefichach mashlim b'arviyos. For that same reason, you can go ahead and complete a tanis that takes place on the day preceding that day. K'loimar, mutar lahashlim erev oisei yom tov, u'lukanos l'seicha k'shumuna. There's no concern with entering that yom tov in a state of fasting. Dehafilu b'ikore, mutar l'sano b'ktas hayayim, because even in the actual day, one is allowed to conduct a partial tanis. So that's when it comes to these days. Avol Shabbos she'asel l'sano b'anas b'ktas l'shem tanis. Shabbos one is not allowed to even do a mitzvah tanis, even a partial tanis. Therefore, asanami lahashlam by arviyos, one is not allowed to be mashlam complete the tanis that takes place on the day preceding Shabbos. Why? Here's the punchline: Mashlim erev Shabbos. If one completes the tanis on erev Shabbos, misana b'miktzas Shabbos, we treat it like he's fasting on part of that Shabbos. So the point here is that if a person actually designates the entire day as a fast day, that would be us even by Yom Tov D'Rabbanan, like Chanukah, Purim, etc. But if it's only a Tanis Shois, he's fasting on part of that day, that's not really designating the day as Yom Tanis. It's just a personal expression. He's personally refraining from eating on that day. So when it comes to Yom Tov D'Rabbanan, that's mutter. And just as the Tanis Shois is mutter, likewise a person can go ahead and complete a Tanis which takes place on the day preceding to that Yom Tov D'Rabbanan. When it comes to Shabbos, not only can't you designate the day as a Yom Tanis, you can't even have a Tanis Shois, that personal refraining from eating on part of that Shabbos. And likewise, you can't go ahead and complete the Tanis which precedes Shabbos, because inevitably you're going to be entering Shabbos in a state of fasting, which is considered like a Tanis Shois. Continues the Gemara, 7 lines from the bottom, Amar Rav Yosef, Lo yishmiel li hashmata. I haven't heard this statement that Ula said, the halacha follows Rabbi Yossi, that we meant to complete, to be mashlim the tanis on Erev Shabbos. Amar li Abaye, at amras ni'alon. Actually, you yourself taught us that halacha. Ve'aha amras ni'alon, and it was with regards to the following brisa that you had dictated that halacha to us. And Rashi explains that Rabbi Yosef fell ill and he forgot his learning. And this is mentioned many times in the Gemara, that Abaye would remind him of things that he himself taught them. So you taught us this halacha on the following brisa. Ein goizerin tanas al tzibur, b'rosh chadash and mechulu. This is the brisa we mentioned earlier, that the chacham would not initiate, would not establish a tanis on the tzibur on the days of Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah, and Purim. But if they established a sequence of fast days, and somehow it encountered one of those days of Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah, Purim, so the brisa says, Ein mafsik, we're not meant to disrupt the sequence of events, we're meant to fast even on those days. And Rameya tells us, name our own Leo, that we're not meant to be mashlim. Although we fast, we don't complete that fast day. And not only when it comes to Chanukah and Purim, also when it comes to Erev Shabbos. For instance, if Tisha B'Av falls out on Erev Shabbos, we fast, but we don't complete the fast day, we don't enter Shabbos in a state of fasting. So this was the halacha, the brisa we mentioned earlier. For Rabbi and Allah, and we learned on that, meaning Abaye speaking to Rav Yosef, you yourself taught us this addition as follows. Om Rav Yehuda Rav, Zu Divrei Rav Meir, She'amar B'Shem Rav Gamliel. This is Rav Meir speaking in the name of Gamliel, that we're not meant to complete, not meant to be mashlim the tanis. Aval Chachamim Aimim. But you meant to know that the shittas Chachamim is, and we're meant to follow this shita, this is shittas Chachamim, Mis'anu Mashlim. When you fast, you complete. So the fact that Abaye is quoting Rabbi Yehuda, the name of Rav, who says that the Chachamim hold, we're meant to complete the fast day. Apparently he's relating to Rabbi Yossi here with the term Chachamim to indicate that this is how we're meant to follow. This is the halacha. Says the Gemara, my lav akhulu. Shall we not say that this statement pertains to everything mentioned in that brisa, to Chanukah and Purim, and also to the Tisha B'Av that falls out in Erev Shabbos, that we meant to complete the fast even though it's leading into Shabbos, in a state of fasting. Says the Gemara, Loi, Chanukah or Purim. When Rav Yehuda tells us the name of Rav, that the Chachamim hold who meant to complete the fast day, which indicates that this is the halacha. He wasn't referring to the Erev Shabbos halacha, because leading into Shabbos, that's problematic. You're not meant to enter Shabbos in a state of suffering. Rather, he was specifically referring to Chanukah and Purim, In those cases, he holds halacha follows mis'ano mashlim, meant to complete those fast days. But when it comes to Shabbos, certainly not. Says Marachanam Mistaver, this seems to be the correct approach, that he wasn't referring to Shabbos. Why? Because if you maintain that Rabbi Yehuda, who's quoting Rav, and saying that we're meant to complete the Tanis, is referring to even Erev Shabbos, that wouldn't work, because it's inconsistent with the incident with which we began our sugya. Habayim Rabbi Rav Yehuda. Wasn't it Rabbi who asked Rabbi Yehuda this very question? A fast day in Erev Shabbos, does it require Hashlama? He never responds. So how could it be that over here he's telling us, yes, we're meant to be mashlim? How is this consistent with the fact that he never responds to this question? So apparently he's not referencing Erev Shabbos. And it appears that when it comes to Erev Shabbos, we're not meant to follow Rav Yesi. We're not meant to complete that Tanis. Says the Gemara, the Tamech, according to your way of reasoning, how are you going to explain the following statement? Mazurta dictated the name of Rav Huna. Halacha misano mashlim. Halacha is that we're meant to complete a Tanis even Erev Shabbos. How is that consistent? Habai minei Rabbim Rav Huna. Prior to asking Rabbi Yehuda, let's remember that Rava approached Rav Huna and asked him the same question. Is one meant to complete a Tanis in Erev Shabbos? And he didn't respond to him. So how could it be that here we have Razutra quoting Rav Huna that we're meant to complete the Tanis? Elo, you must say, these things took place in different times. The initial incident where Rav Huna did not have a response was prior to him hearing this halacha in the name of Rav, who was his Rebbe. And here, Razutra is quoting Rav Huna. They were meant to be mashlim. That was after he heard it from Rav. If that's the case, we can reconcile Rav Yehuda in that same manner. When Rav Yehuda wasn't aware, he couldn't answer. Initially, that was prior to him hearing the halacha name of Rav. However, when Rav Yehuda over here tells us, name of Rav, that we're meant to complete the Tanis, perhaps he's speaking even about Erev Shabbos, and it was after he heard that from Rav. Concludes the Gemara, indeed, Darash Mazutzum Shmid Rav Huna, halacha mis'ana mashlimin, halacha is that one fast on Erev Shabbos, he's meant to complete the Tanis, even if it leads into Shabbos. So in summary, when it comes to a Tanis, if it's the Yom Tov D'Rabbanan, one is allowed to be mis'ana Tanis Shois, part of that day. Likewise, he's meant to complete the Tanis that takes place on the day preceding the Yom Tov. When it comes to Shabbos, however, one is not meant to fast even on part of that Shabbos. When it comes to be mashlim a Tanis that takes place on Erev Shabbos, we have machlekes. According to Rabbi Yesi, one is meant to be mashlim. According to Rabbi Glil, one is not meant to be mashlim, and the Gemara concludes like Rabbi Yesi. Hadran alach makol mar. Continues the Mishnah. Misha yitziu nachrim oyrach ra. One who was taken out of his tchum. We know a person has a boundary of 2,000 amma. He's allowed to walk. So we calculate the 2,000 amma out of the city in all directions. He's not meant to leave that boundary. What if he was taken out through nachrim, through goyim oyrach ra? An evil spirit entered his body and threw him off kilter, and he was unaware of what's going on, and he finds himself out of the tchum. What happens now? He's limited to his 4 amma space, which is his personal domain. The Gemara will discuss whether it's a 4 amas in either direction. The Gemara tells us the makar from the pasuk, shvuis tachtav, a person is meant to stay in his place, in his personal space. So this is the shir of dal damas. So either you have your tchum, your 2,000 amma, but if you're out of your tchum for some reason, then you're limited to 4 amas. Hechziru, what happens if they took him both directions? They took him out of the tchum and they brought him back. It's as though he never left the tchum. He reverts back to his original state. But that's strictly in a case where he was taken 2 ways, inadvertently, by goyim or achra. But if he deliberately goes out of the tchum, or if he finds himself out of the tchum and he deliberately comes back in, he doesn't have this halacha of kilu lo yotza, as will be discussed now, Gemara. Continues the Mishnah. Let's say they took him and they transported him into a different city, which is Mukah Mechitzis. Or Nasnu B'dira B'sar, they placed him in these animal pens, which are enclosed. So it's a Mukah which is enclosed with Mechitzis. The question here is, does he have that limitation of 4 amas, or perhaps we regard the entire enclosure as one solitary residential area, and he's allowed to walk throughout that area? He can walk throughout the entire area. Now, generally speaking, when a person finds himself in a house or in a city, the tchum is measured from outside the city, because the entire city, entire place of residence, of Makom Shvisa, is regarded like his personal space. It's not calculated, it's not deducted from the 2,000 Amma. But that only pertains to where a person was actually Shoyvis, he was there during Ben Hashmashis. That became his Shabbos residence. In contrast to this case, where this fellow arrived here on Shabbos. He wasn't here during Ben Hashmashis. This wasn't his Shabbos residence. Do we say, even so, this is considered to be one entity. It's one enclosed entity, it's one place of residence, and therefore, although he really only has 4 amis, but we can consider this whole enclosure like his personal space. It has a din, it's equated like 4 amis. That's the shita of Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah. We look at the place, at the makom, even though it's not his personal space, but this is a single unit, one makom, and he can walk throughout the entire area. However, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Akiva, Ayrim, no, Ainli Eladal Amos, in this case, where he wasn't there during the onset of Shabbos, this wasn't his personal makom shvisa. Since he arrived there on Shabbos, we can't say, well, it's considered to be one unit as far as he's concerned. He only has 4 amas, his personal space. Let's see Rashi before we continue in the Mishnah. So Rashi here is right at the beginning of the Perek, which is 4 lines from the top. So they transported him out of the Tchum. Oy ruach ra. Shnichnas by shade. Some evil spirit, some demon entered his body. V'nishva daita. It caused him to become deranged. He lost track of what's going on. Yotza chutz l'tchum. V'achach nishtafa. Afterwards, he gained his bearings, and he realizes v'areyu chutz l'tchum. So he only has 4 amas. What if they brought him back in? Hechziru l'teich tchum. Whether it was the goyim or the ruach ra, in any case, it wasn't deliberate. It was something out of his control, and he finds himself back in the tchum. It's as though he never left. The city is considered to be like one personal space, and certainly you can have, in addition to the city, 2,000 am in all directions, as though he never left the city. So that's if he goes back to the original tchum. What if they bring him to a place which is a mukaf machitzis, a lichuli racheres, v'arayim mukafas machitzis, oy shenasnu b'dir b'sar, shem mukafin, v'kefen gadol. These are enclosed areas, large enclosed areas. So according to the first approach, malchas kula, he can walk throughout the entire area. Why? The hoyel mukafas machitzis, since it's surrounded with machitzis, it becomes one unit. Hareik dal amois, it's equated to the din of dal amois. When we speak about dal amois, it's not specifically 4 amas. It means to say his personal domain, his personal usage area, his personal space. A place which is surrounded with mechitzos. We don't care whether it's 2 amas, 10 amas, 100 amas. It's one unit. It's one place of residence. So although this person is really limited to 4 amas, we consider this entire enclosure as though it's only 4 amas, and he can walk freely throughout this entire area. Whereas according to the other shittas, no, he's limited strictly to 4 amas. Continues the Mishnah with a story that illustrates the former halacha. Maaseh shebo mipal nad rasim. These aforementioned chachamim were arriving by ship from this town that's mentioned here. V'fligas finasam bayam. And they travel in the depths of the sea. And it turns out that they actually left their tchum because they were in the ship that was traveling on Shabbos. So they left the 2,000 amma boundary which they had acquired during the onset of Shabbos. They were already way out of that boundary. So they have a din of a yotzei chutz l'tchum who is limited to 4 amas. So what happened? Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, this is the first set of Tanoim that we mentioned earlier, who allow one to walk throughout the entire enclosure. Hochos kul, indeed they walk throughout the entire ship, which is a makam of machitzis. Although they're really limited to 4 amas, the ship is like 4 amas. Whereas the second set of Tanoim, Rabbi Shua, Rabbi Akiva, lo zazam ad aldamis. They didn't budge from their 4 amas. They remained within 4. Shiras al-achmar al-asfam, because they wanted to be machar on themselves. They want to explain why it's only a chumrah. Why isn't this considered the al-pi din? And according to their shita. Because in this case it's different, because they were actually within these mechitzis during ben hashmashes. So halachically speaking, they're allowed to walk throughout the entire sfina, but they want to be machmer. But as Hashem, as the Gemara will explain for us. Continues the Gemara, Pamachas, it was once a time that these Chacham were on a ship, and they arrived at port after nightfall. Once Shabbos had already arrived. They only came to the port after darkness. So they turned to Gamliel with a question. What is the halacha? Can we disembark? Meaning, perhaps we have a din of Yotze Chutz Tchum, because maybe when Shabbos arrived, our ship was more than 2,000 amma from the port. In which case we traveled more than 2,000 amma after Shabbos' arrival. We have a din of Yotze Chutz Tchum, we're limited. We can't disembark. Amalam Mutar Matam, yes, certainly you can come off the boat. Why? Shekvarisi mistakel. Because as we were arriving at port, I have this apparatus where I can measure our distance, and I was peering through this thing, and I determined that we were within the tchum, within the boundary of the port, within 2,000 amma, prior to nightfall, in which case we have a din like all other residents of the city. We did not travel more than tchum, and therefore we can get off the ship, and we have the same status as everybody else in this town. So in summary, we learned that a person has a tchum of 2,000 amma. If somehow he finds himself out of the tchum, he's limited to 4 ammas, which becomes like his new tchum. If he was transported both ways, inadvertently, so he gets back his original status. What if he's placed in a makom which is mukav machitzes? We have a machlekes. Tanu Rabbanon, Gimel Dvarim, Ma'avir Nesa Adam Al Datoi V'Adas Koine. There are 3 things, 3 situations which have the ability to throw a person completely off kilter, off balance, to cause him to violate his own mind, his own das, his own will, and the will of Hashem to do wrong things. Eluain, what are these 3 things? The impact, the influence of Goyim, V'Rachra, or an evil spirit, as we mentioned in the Mishnah, the K'dukei Aniyus, and the exactness, the deprivation of poverty, restrictions of poverty, which can cause a person to lose his bearings. What's the point of discussing this? A person who encounters these situations, he should daven to Hashem for Rachmanis to protect him from the ramification of this situation. I'll tell you the Esakasha. We have a Gemara in Moed Katan which indicates that sometimes the Yetzer Hara of a person also has tremendous power to throw him totally off balance and completely overwhelm him. So why is this not listed in the Gemara here? So I'll tell you the difference here, because when it comes to Yetzer Hara, although sometimes a person finds himself in a situation where he's completely overwhelmed, perhaps he doesn't even have a bechira any longer, he doesn't have the ability to fight, but, says Taisus, must keep in mind that a person has the ability, a person always has the ability to avoid that situation. He knows, look, this place, this time, this situation is a pitfall for me. Once I get in there, I can't get out. He must ensure that he doesn't arrive at that circumstance. So that's within his ability. And therefore, says Taisus, there's a difference between that which is within a person's control as opposed to these, which have an overwhelming control of the person, the Maris Adam, completely. Continues the Gemara. Gimel ein roin pnei Gehenim. There are 3 situations, 3 experiences which are difficult. And when a person experiences them, it substitutes for Gehenim. He no longer has to experience Gehenim due to the difficulties that he experienced. Eluhain, what are these 3 things? The K'dukei Aniyus, as we mentioned earlier. V'cholim me'ayin, illness of one's intestines. V'arashus, being pursued by creditors. V'yesh oimrim, another one on the list. Af mish leish leish lira. Likewise, a person who has a bad wife, someone who's below standard when it comes to ruchnius, or really terrible midas. So, that situation substitutes, makes up for Gehenim. V'idach, now the other shita who didn't list the Isha Ra on his list, why not? Isha Ra mitzvah lagarsha. If he has that situation, it's a mitzvah to divorce her. So why is he keeping her? So, since it's avoidable, so he doesn't have that same status as the other situations, although he's suffering, he doesn't have a situation of substituting for Gehenim. V'idach, the other shita who listed the Isha Ra on the list, he said this too could be unavoidable. Zimrin de ksuvas meruva. Sometimes the ksuv obligation, the monetary obligation to the Isha is too great and overwhelming, and doesn't have the ability to divorce her. Inami, alternatively, is leibanim mina. He has children from her. They have children and doesn't allow for this option. Therefore, it's unavoidable. Why discuss these things? In order that a person should adopt the right attitude. If he experiences these difficulties, he should know that it's instead of Gehenna, it's Mechaper on him. In fact, the Gemara in Brachas Avhei says, when a person experiences Yisurim, the ideal approach is to Mekabel Mehava. Like a carbon, the Gemara says, a person is meant to bring a carbon l'ratzon, willingly. So Yisurim, which are meant to be like a carbon, is meant to be accepted by Ahava, willingly, with ratzon, with love, with understanding, acceptance, and know that it's for your sake, for your goodness, and for your benefit, to be Mechaper. That's the point of mentioning it. One should know that it's going to replace Gehenna, accept it with love. Concludes the Gemara. There are three situations where a person can die even when he's well speaking, without any prior warning. Through illness of the intestinal system, a woman who gave birth due to a weakness, through this sickness, Rashi says, where it doesn't appear like a person is about to pass away, but that can happen. What's the point of discussing this? So a person should be prepared. If a person experiences these situations, a person should prepare the zavdasa, the tachrichim, the shrouds. As Rabbi Yehuda explains, the point here is that a person should be aware of this possibility and do tshuva, be prepared for all eventualities. Continues the Gemara, getting back to the case of a person who left a tchum, if a person leaves the tchum boundary willingly, then he's limited to 4 amos. Pshita, of course. What's the point of mentioning it? It's pretty apparent from the Mishnah. Why? Hashta, because now, Mishnah tells us that even a person who was transported out of the tchum by goyim, he is limited to 4 amos. And no more. Why do you even speak about a case where a person leaves willingly? Of course. Certainly, he loses his privileges. He must remain within his 4 amos. So what's the point of Nachman Amar Shmuel? Ella, rather, this is what he meant to say. Ema, chazal adas, ein lo ila dal damas. Let's say as follows. Ema, what Rav Nachman is teaching us is that, let's say Goyim transported a person out of the tchum. So he finds himself out of the tchum, and then willingly he returns to the tchum, chazal adas. So Rav Nachman is teaching us, although he was taken out of the tchum shloil adas inadvertently, but since you've come back willingly, and that was unlawful, we're not allowed to leave the confines of your 4 amos. It's as though you're leaving your tchum again. And you must remain within your 4 amos that you find yourself in. So that's the chiddush. Says more, if that's the chiddush, that's also pretty obvious from the Mishnah. Hanami Tanina. That also was learned in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that if the goyim take him out, then he has 4 amos. If they bring him back into the tchum, then he reverts back to the original tchum. Hechziru nachrem mekil lo yatsa. As though he never left. That implies that dafka in this case, hechziru hu dikil lo yatsa. Only in this case, where they themselves brought him back, they took him out and they brought him back, and he gets back his original tchum. Aval hitziu nachrem bechazal adas. But if they took him out and he came back on his own, ein lo ila dal damas. Certainly in this case, he's limited to 4 amos. So this too is learned from the Mishnah. So what's the point of Nachman? Says Ma'ela Ema, let's say as follows. This was his chiddush. Yotzel adas, v'yachziru nachram. Let's say he left willingly, and then the goyim brought him back. The chiddush here is, ein lo ila dal damas. Although he was brought back, he was returned to the tchum by the goyim, perhaps that determines things. That's the most important criterion. How did he get back? He came back through the goyim, fine. Perhaps you can get back your original tchum. Rav Nachman comes and tells us, no. Even in this case that the goyim returned him, he only has the al damas. Why? Because remember, how did he get out? Initially he went out ladas. He doesn't have that privilege. Says the Gemara, if that's the chiddush, that's also pashut. Hanami tanina, that also was taught in our Mishnah. The Mishnah specifically tells us, if they took him out and returned him back to the original tchum, it's as though he never left. Only when both ingredients were present here. They took him out and brought him back. Avol yotzal das. But if he went out on his own and the guy brought him back, lie. In that case, he would not return back to his original tchum. We wouldn't say ki lo yotz in that case. So the wording of the Mishnah itself indicates to us this halacha is correct. So why does Rav Nachman need to teach us the halacha? Says the Gemara, perhaps one can interpret the Mishnah in a way where he would not know this halacha. Perhaps I can say, let's start in Ketani. We went to learn the Mishnah in sections, in segments. The Mishnah begins by saying, Misha Yitziu Nachrim, V'chazal Adas. So the initial halacha of the Mishnah is, the guy took him out, but then what happened? This isn't found in the wording of the Mishnah, but we're going to assume that was the end of the story. They took him out, but he came back willingly, V'chazal Adas. Ein lo elo dal damas. In this case, he's limited to 4 amas. That's the first halacha of the Mishnah. Then the Mishnah continues, Hechziru, which is an entirely different scenario. We're speaking about a case where he went out himself, and the goyim returned him. Avol yotzal adas ve'echziru nachrem. The Mishnah is telling us ki lo yotza. In this case, since he was brought back to the original tchum by the goyim, that determines matters. That sets the halacha. If they brought him back, fine. Then you go back to the original tchum. So perhaps that would be a way to learn the Mishnah. Don't learn the Mishnah as though it's referring to one case. The Mishnah is saying the goyim took him out and brought him back, and only there can he revert back to the original tchum. The Mishnah is actually meant to be split into two. The Mishnah begins by saying, Misha Yitziu Nachrim, if they took him out, but then he himself decided to come back on his own. In this case, since you've arrived back at your tchum on your own, you don't get original privileges. You don't get back your first tchum. You stay with your 4 amas. That's the first halacha. The second halacha was, let's say he himself went out, but the goyim brought him back. Oh, the goyim brought him back? Okay. Then he can get back the original tchum, because it's the last leg, it's that last event which determines things. How did he get back to the tchum? Through goyim? Okay. Then we don't consider it as though he himself deliberately left his tchum of Daled Amas, which was granted to him outside the tchum, and deliberately left that and came back in. The goyim brought him back. Okay, so now you can have the original tchum. So that would be a way to learn the Mishnah. Kamash Malon. That's where Rav Nachman comes to tell us, in the name of Shmuel, it's not the case. The only way a person can go back to the original tchum is if it was transported in both directions by the Nachman. So in summary, we learned about a person who's yoytze chutz tchum. So if he went out deliberately or came back from outside the tchum deliberately, in either case, he's limited to 4 amas. Even if he went out shalei l'das, for instance, goyim transported him out of the tchum, he's limited to 4 amas. But if he was transported both ways, shalei l'das, out and in this case, he reverts back to his original tchum, ki'ilu lo yatz. What if he finds himself in a place which is mukav machitzes or machlekes? According to Ramlil and Rav Azaria, he can walk throughout the entire enclosure. According to Bishur Akiva, he only has his 4 amas. Continues the Gemara, 7 lines from the bottom. Bo minei Rabba, they ask the following question of Rabba. A person finds himself out of the tchum, he's limited to 4 amas. And hutzruch l'nekavav. Now, he needs to tend to his personal needs. He needs to go find a place which is suitable for that. A place which is tsanua. Ma, what is the halacha? May he leave his 4 amas to go find that place. Amalem, so Rabbi responded, certainly he can. Gadol kavod habriyos. Human dignity is so great and important. Shadoiche es loisas yishabet Torah has the ability to override loisas in the Torah. Here it's in reference to the Isat Chumen, which is actually the Rabbanon, which is based on the pasuk loisasar. We're not meant to deviate from the instruction of the Chachamim. So that's why the Gemara calls it a loisas say. So you can go ahead and override Isat Chumen, leave the 4 amas to go find himself a makam which is modest, which is sanua, to attend to his needs. Amri Nahadoy. Nahadoy said as follows: if this fellow is a wise man, this is what he should do. When he goes searching for a suitable place, he should head back to his original tchum. Perhaps he's going to find that place that he needs inside the tchum. Ayil tchum, let him go back to the direction of the tchum, and once he gets in there, once he finds himself inside his original tchum, oh, he's in there. And this way, he has his original tchum because he was allowed to do this walking. It was bershus. It wasn't unlawful. Hacham allowed him to go find this place. So it's like the case where the goyim brought him back to his original tchum. So once he finds himself in his original boundary, then he reverts back to the original state, and he's like everybody else in that town. Let's take a look at Rashi. So off to the left, about 7 lines up from where we're holding in the Gemara, Rashi begins with Hutzach L'Kavav. This fellow who was transported out of the Tchum by Goyim, he needs to tend to his needs. Can he leave the 4 amos? And Rabbi responded, certainly he could, because Chavod HaBris is doiche, es loises shebetayra, lav lois sasur, which tells us we're meant to listen to the instruction of the Chachamim. And here as well, it's the Rabbanim, Tchum enami the Rabbanim. And then Ardori added, Ipikechu, hi the nisach l'nakav, this fellow is a pikech. V'yavu l'Rabbanan rishus, l'meipag chutz l'arbamas. This fellow, who the Chachamim granted permission to leave his daldamas, this is what he should do. He should go back in the direction of his tchum. Ay l'tchuma, v'chivan da'al al. Once he's entered, he's entered. Umuter, ki lo yotze, as though he never left the town. Because he came back in with permission. And it's no worse than the case where a person was transported out of the tchum and back in through the goyim, in which case he reverts back to his original tchum. Now the Ritva points out this halacha of Nardoi, that if he finds himself back in his tchum, he can regain the original status. That's only in the case where he was transported initially out of the tchum by goyim. So since he was taken out against his will, and now he came back, he returned to find the Beis HaKisei, then he reverts back to the original tchum. Ki lo yotze. But if you have a case where initially he left willingly, ladas, unlawfully, so although now in search of a Beis HaKisei, he finds himself back in the original tchum, we won't say ki lo yotze. As we learned earlier in the Gemara, that only applies where in both directions it was done lawfully. And indeed the Lashon Rashi also indicates as such, because if we go back to the beginning of the sequence of Rashi that we just learned, Rashi says, Zeh sheitzu Nachem. So specifically, when Nachem took him out. Now, certainly the halacha that a person can go search for a Makam Beis HaKisei applies to any case. Even if a person willingly left the Tchum, and he's limited to 4 amos, he can go find a place of Beis HaKisei. So that halacha pertains to any case. So why does Rashi mention that we're speaking about a case where Goyim took him out? So the Farshim explained, because he's coming to address this point. Now, Ardoi say, he ends up coming back to the Tchum, he reverts back to the old Tchum. But that only pertains to a case where in both directions it was okay. For instance, when he was taken out initially by Goyim. So since he was taken out by Goyim, and he came back for Rishus to find the Beis HaKisei. Therefore, if he's back in the Tchum, it's Ki Lo Yotza, and he has the original Tchum. Okay, time for a brief review of today's daf. We began discussing Halach of Tanis. So if it's a Yontif the Rabbanon, one is allowed to make a Tanis Shois on that day, and certainly one can go ahead and complete the fast day on the day preceding the Yom Tov. When it comes to Shabbos, a Tanis Shas is Asur. Regarding being Mashlim, we have a Machlekes. The Gemara listed 3 cases of possible sudden death, Chas v'Shalom, and a person is meant to prepare himself accordingly. We discussed 3 difficult situations which replace Gehenna, and 3 situations where a person is meant to daven to Hashem for Rachmanas to protect him from those bad influences. We discussed the halacha of Yatzachos HaTchum, and the conclusion was that if either he went out of the Tchum, or if he finds himself out of the Tchum and he came back, Lidas, if he does it willingly, he only has 4 amos. If he went out, even Shlei Lidas, he has 4 amos. If he went out and came back, Shlei Lidas, for instance, he was transported 2 ways by the Goyim, and he finds himself back in the original Tchum, we say Ki Lo Yotza, and he gets back the original status. If he finds himself in a place which is Mukah Mechitzes, or Machlekes, whether he's allowed to walk throughout the entire area, or he's limited and restricted to 4 amos. We discussed that a person may go ahead and find a place for the Beis HaKisei, and if he should find himself back in his original Tchum, Kivan the and he gets back the original status.